Good evening. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Urbana City Council. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Miss Wu,
Here.
Mr. Evans,
Here.
Miss Hersey,
Here.
Miss Colasetti, Miss Bishop,
Here.
Miss Wilkin,
Here.
Mr. Quisenberry, Mayor Marlin.
Here. Just for the audience and public's knowledge, we have two council members attending remotely tonight, council members Colasetti and Quisenberry. Next item is approval of minutes from the previous meeting of September 26th, 2022. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mary Alice, seconded by Sharice. Are there any substantial corrections? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. That motion passes. Next item, additions to the agenda. There are none. Next item is presentations and public input. Before we take public input, we'll take the item of fire department promotions. Chief Dade.
Good evening. We're here tonight. We are going to start.
Chief, could you
I'm sorry.
speak a little? Yeah,
Is that better?
that's better.
We're here tonight. We're going to start a new tradition. In the past, anytime that we had promotions, we would have an annual presentation where everyone would come together at one time and we would recognize those promotions all at once. Going forward, we're going to start doing that on a monthly basis if we have promotions. So each month, at the end of the month, we will try to recognize our members who were promoted. Our members, to advance in their careers, they compete in a very comprehensive promotional process. And so what we'd like to do is recognize those members closer to the time when they get promoted. Currently, we have 4 members we want to recognize. They're not here this evening, but they've been promoted all the way since May. And so we're just going to recognize those individuals here tonight. Hopefully back on. The first we have is Lieutenant Jacob Hutchcraft. He's a 10-year veteran of the department, and he got his promotion on May 7th. We have Engineer Brian Hoff. He was also promoted May 7th, and he's also a 10-year veteran. We have Engineer Jason Rushing, who was promoted September 7th, and he's a 15-year veteran of the fire department. And we have Engineer Matt Ritchie, who was promoted September 9th, and he's a 16-year veteran of the fire department. Going forward, next month we will also have some more promotions. We've had several members of our department retire, and next month we will have people here and they will actually be sworn in. And so it'll give their families an opportunity to see them get recognized, as well as do that before the members of the council. So we thank you and we appreciate this time tonight.
Thank you, Chief. We look forward to recognizing these achievements. Next up, Mayor and Council Strategic Goals, the fourth quarter update. Carol Mitten.
I just wanted to make sure you did public input if there was any, before we go. Is that me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so in the packet is, as we had outlined that we would do, is we have this sort of sheet for each one of the action steps that we're going to be building on by adding quarter by quarter our progress, and then you'll have it all in one place if you want to reflect back on what we've been doing. And so I'll highlight a few things that have been happening, and then I can answer any questions, or if I can't answer them, I'll get back to you. So there's a couple things actually on the council agenda for tonight that will advance a couple of the action items, and one is the accepting the equity and quality of life recommendations that will advance 2 action steps related to that. There's also the IGA with the City of Champaign, whereby we'll be collaborating with them on an application and funding process for homelessness and housing initiatives. We also have a number of items, as was highlighted last quarter, but we're moving closer to having ARPA applications in for a number of items. Those include funding community partners and enhancing city programs to address root causes of gun violence, funding community partners that promote health and wellness, providing gap funds for the housing action plan, the home art plan, and funding to rehabilitate dilapidated homes in targeted neighborhoods. Also, since the forms were completed, on the form related to items in the police department to enhance current police capacity and so on, mention is made that we have an application in for the ABLE program, which is the active bystandership for law enforcement. That's kind of advancing efforts around de-escalation and empowering officers to intervene should they see something that is not consistent with policy. That application has been accepted. We need to identify 6 or 7 police officers on our force that would become trainers, and then there's a train-the-trainer part of this program. So we have 3 to 4 trainers identified so far. Timing is still TBD, but it's likely that we'll be able to kick that off in the spring. ABLE also requires that we pass a resolution sort of embracing the principles of the program, so we'll bring that to the council sometime between now and the spring. We have the respondents for the public safety review are currently being interviewed. I think, I don't know, are they all this week? I've lost track. Yeah, they're this week, and Jaya and Chandra are on that committee with us, conducting those interviews. We're also making really good progress on the subdivision and land development codes. That has been a long time coming, and we expect that revisions to the council will be presented by the end of the fiscal year, and that's going to be a lot of information for you all to review and ask questions about. It's a pretty big lift. That's why it's taken staff so long too. And then staff will be publishing an RFP soon for EV charging as a service. Basically, the idea would be to see if we can get any proposals for someone at no cost to the city, but on city facilities, to provide EV charging stations that are basically cost-free to us, and that they have a business model that would work for that. So those are some of the highlights, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Any questions for Carol? Chandra?
For the, under housing, enhanced compliance with housing provisions of human rights ordinance, it says no change for Q4. Is there like a reason for no change? Like, are things still getting underway with that as far as like what to do to enhance compliance, or?
I think that, you know,
Entering central conferencing. Please enter your access.
Right now, we don't have a community outreach coordinator, and that's a person who would normally be assisting Carla with some of those efforts, and so I think she has a very full plate right now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we're not making a whole lot of progress there. But yeah, she definitely has plans to do more. She's very interested in educating landlords in particular about their responsibilities in that area. And she's learned a lot because of some of the complaints that have come in about where there's some misunderstandings.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a bandwidth issue at the moment.
Because I would think that the number of, complaints or mediation things that she has to participate in would maybe decrease if there was more education and compliance
Fair
around
point.
that. So, I mean, I know it's a lot of, you have to prioritize and give and take, but I think like doing the education part might cut down on the mediation projects she
Sure.
has to do.
Yeah,
So
it's a fair
that's
point.
just my suggestion. Thank you.
Any other questions? Mary Alice?
So looking at the manual for victims of violence and support services, I know that you're working through that right now. What has the discussion been on how to disseminate the information?
I know that the group that's working on it, what they want to have some copies that are paper copies available. But what they really think will be the most useful is to have a QR code that you could scan and then get the information on your phone. And that's a way of keeping it refreshed and keeping it really very accessible to people. And it's also an easy way to be able to get it out, because it's the QR codes are so easy to add on to flyers or add on to websites and so on. So that's what the way I think will be the primary means of disseminating it, is a QR code that links to a website. And then they can search it that way too, because they want to have not just, they want to have the kinds of services that might seem tangential for people, but that are really more comprehensive, given that, sometimes if you're a victim of violence, that could lead to, you being food insecure or housing insecure or something like that. And so connecting with all those various services is the goal.
So I guess my only suggestion would be to also have a short URL in addition to the QR code, because there are some people who don't know how to use QR codes, and it might not be as accessible for people. So if you create a short URL, it would be easier to
Okay.
type in.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. That's encouraging that is going to be final soon.
Any other questions or comments? Grace?
Thank you. Thanks for the update. I'm happy to see a lot of the progress on a lot of these. I had similar kind of thoughts that Chandra mentioned about housing compliance with human rights ordinance. I would definitely appreciate a conversation on that. I think we've talked about it for quite a while now, just to understand the situation a little better and what can or needs to be done. I'm also curious at what point, I think education is definitely a very important step and a good place to start. At what point it turns into fees and legal action and having some real enforcement. Because there are a lot of people with vouchers right now depending on having access to housing, and I think that's a really timely and important issue. So I would definitely appreciate if we could have a little more discussion on that at a later time. One of my other thoughts was about the SWIFT program. It says in here about it being fully funded. So we're looking at some other ways to have possibly scholarships for Urbana residents. I think that's a great option. I definitely support that. And if you could let us know if there's any way that we can help support that as council members.
Could I just make a comment about that? Just in the same way that we brought the item related to pandemic support for non-traditional businesses back to council and said, we think we need to revise this action step, we need to do the same thing with the SWIFT program, because we really never had that conversation, and that's a to-do on my part, that I think we need to collectively decide that is a replacement action step. So I'll put a note and we can have a discussion about that at a future meeting.
Great, thank you. And my last question was about the update city infrastructure codes. I think that's great to hear progress on the subdivision and land development codes. And I was trying to remember, Tim, I thought I was trying to slip in energy codes on this also, and that was kind of a next thing after that. I just didn't know if that was an accurate or up-to-date understanding, if energy code updates were a plan for this or a later iteration.
I'll just to update on that, some of the energy code stuff is all being reviewed along with the building codes that are being updated. I think the last update was 2009, I think. So it's been about a decade since new building codes have been adopted, and some of the energy code stuff is kind of wrapped up into that. And that's a function of the state adopting the building codes and then us basically reviewing that stuff, looking at any amendments we want to do, and then pushing that forward to enforce locally.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on the goals? Chandra?
So Carol, you had said something about like the building codes being intense.
Chandra, could you speak a little closer to your mic?
You said
Good.
the building codes or a lot of information. Would it be able to get a little like bite-sized pieces of that before the end of the fiscal year, so that we don't have to digest that much information in maybe a short period of time? Is that possible?
Do you know, Tim does or
Mike's
Mike?
probably a better.
This is on
know
the
the
sub,
timeline
this
of
is on
that.
subdivision and land use code.
Subdivision Land Development Code?
Yeah, is that, what, has the group determined in what manner they plan to present it to the council so that it can be digested, in reasonable quantities?
I don't know if we've got there yet.
Okay,
Okay.
I think the point is a good one, and so I'll just take that back to the group. Okay.
Okay,
Thank
thank you.
Great. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Carol, for the update. We'll move on to public input. If anyone wishes to address the Urbana City Council, please come forward, speak into the microphone. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to council input and communications. Does anyone have anything to share with the public? Grace.
Thank you. Want first off saying thank you to Chief Dade and the fire department for bringing your promotions to council. I think that's a great idea. Nice to see some people come out, and congratulations to those who are promoted. Also just wanted to remind the public that our ARPA applications are open through mid-November. Also wanted to highlight the Pumpkin Smash event at the Urbana Landscape Recycling Center the Saturday after Halloween, November 5th. 11 a.m. to 3 p.m., and that you can also bring out your pumpkins throughout the fall for free. And then also just wanted to continue to mention that I'm still interested in conversations about hybrid meetings and police budget resolution. Thank you.
Any other comments? Sharice.
I just want to state that I believe GFL Garbage Hauling is hiring. They are in need of some staff, and I'm saying this based on the fact that doesn't seem that the garbage in my area gets picked up. I don't know if anyone else is having that problem, but they apparently need staff. So please feel free if you need a decent paying job. Garbage hauling is a very worthwhile profession to get into, so give them a call. Thank you.
Any other communication? I would just like to remind folks that the survey regarding the police search for the chief of police is available online. The easiest way to find it is on the city's homepage at urbanaillinois.us. There's a link there that'll take you to the survey. And it's one of the ways that the search firm is engaging the community in this stage of the process. And I just wanted to follow up a little bit on the comments that Carol had made about ABLE. We were notified, because this is a big deal, we were notified this week that Georgetown University Law Center's Innovative Policing Program has accepted Urbana into the ABLE program. And ABLE stands for Active Bystandership for Law Enforcement. This is an approach that trains the trainer. We'll send several police officers to training. It's free of charge, except we pay the overtime cost for the officers' training. It provides practical, active bystandership strategies and tactics to prevent misconduct, reduce officer mistakes, and promote health and wellness. It basically helps give officers the tools they need to overcome inhibitors to intervene in one another's actions. We saw the consequences of this failure in the George Floyd incident in Minneapolis, and this is in direct response to our commitment to the 10 shared principles and commitment to constant improvement. So it's a great honor to be included in this program, and we're in the process of identifying the officers who will be trained, and then they in turn will train the rest of the department. Okay. Unfinished business, we have none. We'll move on to reports of standing committee, which is the committee of the whole. And given that James is attending remote, I would ask Mary Alice, Mayor Pro Tem, to report on behalf of James as committee chair.
All right, on behalf of James Quisenberry, who is the chair for the committee of the whole, we have 6 items on the consent agenda, so I'll read those. Ordinance number 2022-10-042, an ordinance approving a major variance for Woodward Garage at 2003 Airport Road, which is case number ZBA 2022-MAJ05. And ordinance number 2022-10-043, an ordinance amending Schedule J of Section 23-183 of the Urbana Local Traffic Code prohibiting parking at all times on certain streets for Harvey Street. And ordinance number 2022-10044, an ordinance amending Schedule O-1 of Section 23201 of the
Welcome to
Urbana
Ring
Local
Central
Traffic Code,
Conferencing. Please enter
designating
your access code, followed by the pound. This menu will repeat.
designating load restrictions upon vehicles using certain highways for Kohler Avenue over Boneyard Creek and Washington Street over Sunny
Access
Estates
code
Ditch.
accepted.
Number D, Resolution Number 2022-10083R, a resolution approving a certain intergovernmental agreement between the City of Urbana and the City of Champaign for housing and homeless innovation consolidated application. And Resolution Number 2022-10084, a resolution accepting the equity and quality of life, the EQL, projects recommended by the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission. And finally, Resolution Number 2022-10085R, a resolution authorizing an extension of time for a temporary or experimental traffic regulation, a one-way westbound traffic on Fairview Avenue from Harvey Street to Goodwin Avenue.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Mary Alice, seconded by Sharice. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Ms. Hersey?
Yes.
Ms. Colacetti? Ms. Bishop?
Can you repeat that, Jaya?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin?
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry?
Yes.
Thank
That was a
you.
yes.
Mhm.
That motion passes. Moving on to the item on the regular agenda.
So on behalf of the Committee of the Whole, I move approval of Resolution Number 2022-10079R, resolution amending the City of Urbana and Urbana Home Consortium Consolidated Plan for fiscal year 2020-2024 and Annual Action Plan for fiscal year 2022-2023.
Second.
Moved by Mary Alice, seconded by Sharice. Any discussion? Grace.
Thank you. My comments on this, I do want to chime in some last things, is that I do support spending CDBG money where it's needed and keeping it in the community and maintaining our level of HUD funding. However, I don't see how this amendment to the plans helps when there's no projects in mind for fire activities. I think there's a lot of confusion with the missing memo. Originally, we were told that there were 2 new categories being added, but it seems that that's not the case. There's one thing being added into existing categories, and that one thing is fire activities called capital improvement fire activities, but capital improvements already in there. It seems like there are a lot of great opportunities for us to spend this money other places, and I'm going to be confident and hopeful that we can do that. There are things that we could reimburse, like all of the equals projects except one that would qualify if they could be done in time. There's potentially the Park District Health and Wellness Center that some of these costs could be used for. First Followers is already an established CHODO and has used HUD money working with community development. In some initial conversations with them, they are interested in being able to use this money by the deadline, possibly for reentry housing for women that could also flex for a domestic violence shelter. And then we also have the consolidated funding with Champaign, which I think is a great opportunity. So I think that there are numerous ways that we can spend this money that are concrete things that are already happening versus this vague idea of fire activities that's not selected yet. I don't see how this is the best option when we're trying to expediently spend these funds. I support the fire department services and what they provide for the public, and I support new fire stations, and that's already in the budget and the capital improvements, and that's already the plan. What I don't support is using CDBG money for fire stations beyond the essential, or taking it from ARPA off the top, or any other way to build beyond what we've already allocated for. So I will be voting no for this because of those reasons, and I think this will pass tonight, but even if it doesn't, if there were selected fire activities, this could come back to council, and we already had the public hearing, and we could make these changes at a later date if there were some activity that does come to light. But right now, there's just been a lot of confusion. I think we have a lot of great other opportunities, and I don't see how this is helpful in the goal of expediting spending the CDBG money. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Sharice?
I agree with Grace. There's been a lot of confusion. Because the category is what we're voting on, which is a HUD category. It's just the title of a category that includes fire services. It's not that there's anything, as far as what I gather, what my knowledge is, I'll qualify that. So the confusion, I don't know where the confusion came from because of the simple fact that I know that Sheila had said that that's just a category that HUD has to use in order for us to add the category, and it happens to have fire services in the title of the category. It's not about spending money on the fire stations. But yes, there definitely has been a lot of confusion. So I'm hoping in some way that clarifies a little bit of something, because it's really just about being able to spend the money more quickly by adding that particular category that happens to have the words fire services in it. It's not about spending the money, from my understanding, on fire services itself. And so that's it.
Thank you. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
No.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Ms. Colacetti,
Yes.
Ms. Bishop,
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin,
No.
Mr. Quisenberry.
Yes.
That motion passes. Thank you, Mary Alice and James. Moving on to reports of special committees, there are none. There are reports of officers. Any other reports? Carol?
Will is going to give a little update on the ARPA process as we're moving through the application process.
Will Kolchowski?
Okay, little is definitely correct. So we're about a little halfway past our application window. Applications are still open until November 16th. At this point, there's been 3 applications that have been completed in the system using our software, and there's 23 other profiles created, and those are in various stages of completion. So that's what we've gotten so far. There's plenty of time for people to still apply. The RPC has plenty of office hours still available, so there's still lots of opportunities to apply and get help and get all the questions answered that people need.
Thank you. Thank you. We have no new business tonight. The last item on the agenda is a discussion item, so no official action will be taken, and this is on fire station programming. It will be led by Tim Cowan, Public Works Director. And I believe Mike Phillips is here as well, and Chief Dade.
Good evening, Council. A few weeks ago, I sent out a feedback survey to everybody trying to help us kind of hone in on what we thought this draft program would look like. I'm going to just kind of run through initially, talk about some of the feedback discussions, share some of the results from the feedback from council on those things, and then kind of highlight some things that I think require a little bit more discussion, things that may not need as much, and then go through the draft program that we've produced from the results of this survey with everybody. So some of the questions that we had asked on this, number one was in the enhanced program, there was considerations for upgrading one of the training rooms to a small community room. Number two in the enhanced program was upgrading from a single city office at the station to up to 3 city offices at each station. Enhancement program, third item is accommodating 2 additional firefighters for a total of 6 per shift. The Amplified program, there was considerations for upgrading the training room to a large community room. Amplified program, item number 5 here is increasing the additional city office space from 1 in the essential up to 5. Amplified item number 6 here is additional fire administration space. Amplified program item number 7 was accommodating 2 additional firefighters for a total of 6 per shift, but also enlarging living and support spaces for that. And then number 8 in the Amplified is a new outbuilding to provide affordable vehicle equipment storage on site for the fire department. 9 was another category looking at considerations for geothermal and heating and cooling. 10 was looking at solar power for the facility. 11 was looking at LEED or passive house certification for the facility. And then 12 was just getting an overall kind of temperature for what people thought were, reasonably considerable funding sources to accommodate the program that we end up supporting. So I'm just going to kind of work through these one by one. So for the enhanced program, upgrading to a small community room, this is 7 council members and the mayor here. So 8 total feedback responses, 5 of which said that, no, they did not support this at either station based on the information provided. 2 said yes, but only at 1, and preferably Philo. Some of the preferences between Philo and Lincoln, I think, are still kind of subject to, additional considerations where the ultimate need is determined, but trying to gauge, where people think that may make sense. And then 1 person had indicated that they supported this at both stations. An enhanced program for upgrading the city office space to up to 3 offices. Overwhelming support for not doing this at either station, with 7 feedback responses that said no at neither and 1 that said yes at both. The accommodations for 2 additional firefighters, total of 6 per shift. The majority said no, and then there was kind of a split between, supporting the design as part of our base design, and then either bidding as an alternate or being prepared to add that in the future. The other half said no, but supporting, having space reserved on site strategically for that expansion in the future. And then we had 1 response for yes, expanding at both now, and 1 for yes, but only at 1 of Philo, preferably. For the Amplified program, upgrading the training room that was scoped in the essential to a large community room, nobody supported this. I don't think that there was overwhelming support for this, and as you can see, none of the council members or the mayor did either. Amplified program, additional city office space, so this would be increasing to up to 5 city offices at each station, and again, this was overwhelming support of no. Amplified program, additional fire administration space. As you can see, this one probably requires a little bit more discussion. But generally, I think the lament was yes. It's kind of needling out, yes at 1 was the overwhelming support if you look at it like that. Deciding which one, as I talked to a few people, it still was kind of more dependent on where it made more sense. I think the support was there, but where was, still in question. We had no at neither, and then we had yes at both as well as responses. So that's one we probably need to discuss a little bit more. Accommodating the 2 additional firefighters for a total of 6, as well as enlarging living bay and support spaces in the Amplified program. There was a no response for this, but all counselors supported the idea of, having space to expand in the future. The outbuilding for affordable vehicle equipment storage, overwhelmingly 6 people said no, but 5 of those 6 supported reserving space for this expansion in the future. 2 people did say yes on this one. Geothermal heating and cooling. Overall, I think, all 8 people, like the idea of geothermal heating and cooling. The majority preferred the idea of incorporating it as an alternate bid, and there were some variable responses on what the payback period is, and I think some of that's probably just with a little bit more, once we dig into the idea of what that means a little bit more, that'd be helpful. But we did hear 6, 10, and 30 years were all council suggestions on that. Other solar power at the facility, again, pretty much everybody supported the idea of solar power here. 5 supported incorporating it as an alternate bid where we would design it to be solar ready and we could either bid it as an alternate or potentially pursue the solar ready PPA idea where we kind of design it solar ready and then after a year of use we could work with a third party vendor that more or less would install the solar, own the solar portion of it, and we would get discounted power usage from that. Suggestions on that would be 5, 10, and 30 years for payback on that as well. But as I noted, the power purchase agreement also garnered some support from council. LEED or passive house certification. The overwhelming support was no certification, with 5 saying that. There were 3 people that had indicated pursuing certification. I will note that as far as whether it was LEED, passive house, or what certification, for the ones that did support, I think they were kind of open to the idea of which one. It was less specific as to this one or that one, but they liked the idea of certification. But the overwhelming support was no certification, more of a question of do we want to get the theoretical scoring with the design and not necessarily follow through with the certification process post-construction. And then funding considerations, this eventually we have to figure out exactly how we're going to pay for this. So we wanted to put some ideas out there to get feedback from everybody on what kind of things they thought they would support. We'll certainly do more work after this meeting to kind of shore up some ideas about how this could happen. We do have funding gaps, as allocated right now, obviously. But a lot of support for seeking grants, a lot of support for bonding additional money, pretty good support for CDBG, ARPA, and additional CR&I contributions from the general fund. Rate adjustments to other revenue streams had a little bit of support, and then we had a couple that said no support beyond the essential needs. One council member that would consider delaying the construction of at least one fire station. One thing that I think we can take off the table is the elimination or delaying of other CR&I projects, as nobody supported that option. So we at least ruled one out for sure. So just an overview of all of that information. Items that I felt we had a pretty clear majority consensus on. City office upgrade seemed like a pretty resolute no to that. Accommodations for 2 additional firefighters, total of 6 per shift. No, but I think there was an idea that we would either be okay to incorporate it in the design and either bid as an alternate that we could or couldn't award, or be ready for the future, or just reserving space. So maybe hashing out what we think we want to invest in right now there. Training room upgrade to large community room was an overall no. Additional city office space was an overall no. Accommodations for the 2 additional fighters within large living bay support space was a no. The outbuilding for affordable vehicle equipment storage was a no, with the majority being okay to reserve potential space for future construction of that. Geothermal heating and cooling, yes, and design as an alternate was the preference. Solar power was yes, and design solar ready as an alternate. There was support for PPA too. I'm going to stop on those and just say, if this makes sense to everybody, we can move on and focus our discussion on the items that are a little bit less hashed out. But if someone wants to discuss one of these specifically, this may be the time that would make sense to pick any of those out that you might want to talk about.
Is there anyone who disagrees with the conclusions that Tim just presented? Chandra?
I wouldn't say I disagree, but I think the solar power one could maybe be eligible for more discussion, because I guess, would we discuss between being solar ready and then support for the PPAs? Like, I feel like that might be a discussion point, because it seems like it was, yes, people were supportive of solar, but just like how to implement it or when to implement it.
Right, and I think the way that we would proceed with this would be, you need to incorporate the idea of solar in your design, and then whether we bid that as an alternate or we take it out of there completely and we're just prepared to do a PPA after the fact, we can do either in that scenario. It's just really getting the designers to understand this facility is likely going to have solar in one way, shape, or form. So they need to be able to design those components around the idea of that.
Mary Alice?
Overall, I agree with your assessment in terms of the items that really don't need further discussion, that we have quite a good majority that are in support of these decisions. I guess my only caveat would be, on the form, specifically it was stated when we were talking about the additional firefighters, that there was, we're not to think about ambulance service. And I bring that up just because I know that personally, I think it's something that we should be looking into. I know that there's other city council members who think that we should be looking into it. So I guess my caveat there is I don't know how to reserve space for that particular thing, but I just wanted to put that out there.
So, okay. So it is being considered in a parallel path. We issued the RFQ to put out to the ambulance services here to gauge their interest on potentially housing units within either of these substations. So we have got proposals back from 2 ambulance services that is just due for post-processing. The idea is for us to focus on existing city needs, and then the ambulance piece could be basically another portion that would still be encompassed in this, but for us to focus on what is yes or no for us. And then the ambulance is still a second parallel track that would be incorporated with this depending on those responses.
I guess my point is that if we do move forward with that we would need a larger living space and more bunk space. So that's my caveat.
Right, but the idea is we need to get to concept. Design won't even start till probably closer to the end of the year. So we're gonna have 2 months between now and then to know whether ambulances are on board or they're not on board.
The other thing with looking at the needs for the fire department, the 6 spaces are for firefighters, so we don't want to get that confused as far as looking at, do we want to make sure that we're allowing for expansion in the future just for fire service? That's a whole, the concept of the ambulance is an entire different discussion, even though it'll be happening, like Tim said, parallel with this. That would be something that would have to be negotiated kind of separate. And then that would bring in, possibly another revenue stream that would change this discussion. But when we're looking at these, these needs, it's just for the fire service. And I did have one point of clarity too for the optional outbuilding. It's not looking to just build the outbuilding. That was also an alternate in design plan where they were looking at if you guys say yes to certain square footages, would it be better to have an outbuilding that would be built at a way less square foot, dollars per square foot? And so that was offered up to us by the design team. So basically, if you say yes to certain training space, office space, apparatus space, do we do that at $150 or $200 a square foot or $400 a square foot? If you say, you understand what I'm saying? So they were giving that to us as an option. So to me, if we're saying no here at this time, then they're going to build it into the plan at the higher dollar amount, if that makes sense.
That's not entirely true.
Well,
I understand that's an option to build out for that space, but everything that's in the plan and the essential today is going to be built in the fire facility. We're not going to build we're going to build a minimum of 2 bays. If we consider, if there was a need for a 3rd bay, that would be a separate consideration. This is really for expansion of vehicle equipment needs, any other usage space needs that the fire department would need outside of that. The apparatus bay, I think if and when we need an apparatus bay, whether it's for medics or fire service expansion, that's probably going to be different, and that's going to be part of the base building. So the outbuilding, to me, is truly an expansion for affordable vehicle equipment space. It's some additional space, but generally speaking, that's going to be the primary function of that.
Mary Alice.
I just have one follow-up question. So you're probably going to say no to this, but I am curious about the existing storage capacity of the fire department. That's something that, and you're probably going to say there is none. But I'm just, as we think about these things, and to your point about costs in terms of, is it cheaper for us to do it now or later? From your perspective, what type of, if we take the vehicles out for a moment, because those are giant, right? Storage for the fire department, how are we right now with that?
Better than we've been in the past. We just built the 23,000 square foot storage facility. Fire has, I think, a little less than 7,000 square feet in that reserved. The alternative for this was, to really kind of move that to a substation somewhere that they had more immediate access to that stuff. And Public Works certainly has a need to bring more stuff in at some point, but it's just kind of a gauge of, where's the balance at? We still, I think we have another, I think about 11,000 square feet in the facility. Police has about 3,000 square feet in the facility, and then fire has the other 7,000 for now. So better than we've been in the past is the answer, but it's still a little bit delocated.
Okay, thank you.
Sharice, and then I'll ask the two folks attending remotely if they have any comments on this part of the discussion.
I think basically what I want to know, in particularly, how many firefighters are on shift at a time?
Currently, right now, we've got, if everyone's on duty, we've got 20 per shift, and that is right now with the Safer 6 included. Without the Safer 6 that we've got with the Safer grant, then it would be 18 per shift.
So at the two fire stations that we're talking about rebuilding, they house and bunk right now 18 people?
Oh, no. So that's per shift divided between all 4 stations.
So there's 6 people per station?
4.
4 people? 4 people per station?
There's more people at Station 1 than there are at
Yes.
the substation.
So Station 1 has 2 trucks.
Mm-hmm.
So each truck has the capacity to have 4 people on each truck. And we have, we've got the ladder truck, then we've got a pumper, and then we've also got our battalion chief that responds from this building here.
Okay, so my question then is, like, the accommodations regarding firefighters, and I had a hard time answering this question because it's like I don't even know how many firefighters need to be, there to put out a fire. So my question is then, regarding those 2 stations, okay, what is your recommendation? What do you think? It's one thing for me to say, oh, no, we don't need, I don't know.
We're recommending that we build them for 6, to house 6 firefighters. And the reason when I was saying that for fire needs and not the ambulance is because if you look at the call volume, and we can get into that stuff later, when you start looking at that, some of our call volumes already show that we should probably be running a second engine at a couple of our stations. If we ever get into that, we don't need to build another station. We just may need to run another engine from that station. If we were to do that, we would need the extra bay space, which we have built in now, but we would need the extra living capacity and bunk room for those 2 firefighters.
Okay, because what comes to mind for me is about a week after I was sworn in for my appointment, there was a church fire, as a matter of fact, at Miss Clark's church, and it was like 19 degrees below zero or something, and I know that it's in Champaign, but Urbana, that Lincoln Avenue station, also cooperated and was in on that. And it just seemed like there were firefighters all over the place because this took out the whole sanctuary of this church. And I would think that if in a situation like that, what would be a 3-alarm or a 2-alarm fire, you might have to have other space. And I just didn't know, because I don't know how many people are on shift, it makes it difficult for me to determine how many bunks there should be. So that's why I was asking.
Yeah. In that situation, you're talking about mutual aid, and then we start calling firefighters back in who are off duty and off shift at that time. So when you see that many firefighters, a lot of times we're calling in resources. So those firefighters aren't necessarily bunking there. They're just coming in to help out with the large incident.
It sounds like should this item be moved down to those requiring more discussion?
I think so. I think we should be looking at the 6 firefighter model as the essential model.
Okay, well, let's do that for tonight then, for discussion. Jaya, did you have any further thoughts on the list that was presented?
Not at this time, thank you.
Thanks. James?
Yeah, I think one thing I just wanted to be sure of is that the base plan that we're working with addresses any gender equity challenges we might have with our current firefighter staff. I think we talked about that a little bit the very first time that we were talking about details. I just want to make sure that that hasn't been lost, that we have multiple genders involved in fighting fires in Urbana, and the place where they live needs to respect that.
Just to make sure that folks understood what Mr. Quisenberry said, that the comment focused on making sure we accommodate gender equity and in the design of these new quarters.
And just to provide some feedback on that, everything we have programmed right now provides single-user restrooms, gender equity. All of those are kind of the standard in today's fire stations.
Good to know.
Thank you.
Grace?
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. I think the survey results, seeing it like that, was very helpful. It saved us a good amount of discussion time getting to the point of it. Could you explain a little more about what alternative bid means?
Essentially, we could bid it, we could design it for that, and then we would bid it either, you would choose one as a base bid, which I presume you're talking about like geothermal and solar here. You would design either the solar or the geothermal as the base bid, which is this is what we're going to do unless the alternate comes in so much better. Typically, like with these, we would design it for kind of traditional means, and then the alternate would be to do it all for geothermal heating, cooling, or solar power. So we'd have a hard number during bidding that we could either opt to award or opt not to award if it was what we felt was excessive at the time.
Okay, so it sounds like that still includes getting an estimate at least and seeing what the options are.
Yeah, it's essentially kind of preparing the design so that we can get a hard number to make a decision on.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question, I think you've already shared most of it, but just wanted to check in quick too with the department if these things that we have some consensus on, sounded like we were in agreement on a lot of these in previous discussions, but I just wanted to check again if as a department you guys felt okay with these things that we have consensus on as well.
Yeah, I think we're pretty close on everything. Once again, just differentiating between our office needs space and then city office needs space. Making sure like prevention and community risk reduction as we look into expanding that division, that we've got space for those individuals, office space for them. So.
Okay, I think we can move on to the items that need further discussion.
Okay, we'll take these just one by one and just open it up for each of these. The training room upgrade to small community room, and I'll run back there real quick to the slide to just kind of show the feedback on that one. There was probably still a majority for no at neither station, but a 5-3 to me thought maybe that warranted just a little bit of discussion. It seemed like, again, the majority is a no. That's how we have it in the program now, but this is, worthwhile for discussion if anybody that had opted for yes, including a small community room, if these wants to talk to their other counselors about why they would want to do that, or if anybody'd like to talk about why they wouldn't.
Chris?
Could you define better what a training room is?
So the training room is essentially going to be like a large conference room that would be capable of, for fire staff meetings, potentially, depending on how it's set up, other internal staff meetings. I think the idea was so that it could house, at least in the conceptual plan, up to 20. I think fire would prefer, potentially if we pursue that, to do a slightly larger one at one station and slightly smaller at the other, which is discussed in the program a little bit. But Essentially, it would be a larger, bigger than a small conference room meeting space.
But it would be for internal use only as opposed to a community room that would be accessible for certain public uses,
Correct.
which has a lot of other implications.
Yeah, and 20 is the minimum. We're looking at, we probably need room for at least 30 people. We're talking about being able to bring our entire shift together, do CPR training, and trainings that we have to do, EMS training. We have to train weekly. We're always training and coming together. And then that 20 just takes care of our staff. It doesn't take care of instructors and people who may be coming in to help aid in those trainings. So we need that space just for us for training. The talk of converting it into a public space is because it would have to be large enough for at least 30 people. That's where that came in, but we're not advocating that it be a public use space like that.
Mary Alice, was your hand up?
Yeah, so, you know, I was one of the people who said yes, but only at Philo, and my thought was not to provide space to open to any community group. My thought was that this might be an opportunity to allow city people to meet with community people.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of why I thought this would be a good opportunity to bring them into the building, but we're not reserving space for whichever club wants to come in. And I thought that that would be an excellent outreach for that area. So that's the reason why I thought Philo would be a good area, and the reason that I supported this at the time. I still believe that. So.
Any other comments? Chandra?
I think I was the other yes at Philo. I can't really remember right now, but I think I had that same idea, like at Philo, because in that community area, there's a lot of outreach potential. And I was thinking like, you know, not just CPR for a fire, but CPR for like young babysitters or whatever. And that could be hosted by fire people. And so I think that that's why I selected the upgrade to the small community room at one of the stations, particularly Philo, because it was more neighborhoody. So.
Any other thoughts? Sharice?
I'm not sure, I can't remember, to be honest, but I do think that I also agreed that I wanted something like that. And my whole thing, 'cause what I've noticed is that nobody voted for Lincoln. But my whole thought on that was based too, and I'm guilty, of course, of not doing it. In my comments, is like I think wherever the community needed it most. So, but I also had the same idea that what Chandra was saying is that not only could you train, you know, the firefighters, but it would be a good, like Barry Ellis said, it'd be a good community outreach for also to bring in people from the community, and they could be trained on CPR, and that may take CPR and other medical things that the citizen, you know, residents can do, knowing how to take a pulse, knowing how to, there's a lot of different medical things, knowing how to swaddle a baby, you know, could make a difference. And I just felt that would be a good space to use for that. In addition, though, I'm also always thinking about weather conditions, power outages, so on and so forth, and if should people need to take shelter or shelter in place, there might be enough space that could be converted so that a certain amount of citizens would be able to shelter in place. So that was my thought.
Chris?
Chief, I heard you say you need space to train once a week. Could you maybe expand on, you're not just doing CPR, so what other kinds of training, and where are you doing training now?
So right now, we'll go to Station 4. There's a small conference room there at Station 4 that we use. Sometimes we have to expand onto the apparatus bay floors to train. We come to Station 1. It depends on weather and different things like that. And so a lot of times we're just on the apparatus bay right now, which is not the healthiest, for us to just be out there, but we have to have space for everybody. And like you said, it's not just EMS training, it's everything that we do. Sometimes we're actually on-site training, but there's a lot of hands-on that goes on in rope rescue, technical rescue, and all those things before we actually go sometimes to a site and train, tool maintenance and all that kind of stuff. So when we start doing that and we have information that has to be, sometimes we have to train on the computers, or just like this, we've got to be in front of the screens to get our information. And so sometimes we have to break the shift up into 2 different groups. So we'll start one group in the classroom and another group out on the site, and then we switch them because we don't have the capacity to get everybody there sometimes.
I want to go to our remote participants. Jaya, did you have any thoughts on the training room upgraded to small community room?
So I was able to get questions answered about that ahead of time, so I'm good. Thank you.
Could you repeat that a little bit louder? Is that a no?
She said she's good.
She's good. Okay, thank you. James?
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot because I thought we could benefit from more community space, but the real challenge is we do have our schools and the park district that have space in both of these neighborhoods. And if we're going to talk about programming or training that we want to do for the community, we would have to be planning to support that from a staffing standpoint. So at this point, I know I was an advocate for this community space, but people have to understand how we're going to use it if we're going to invest in it. And I had not seen what I thought was momentum to how we would use it and how we would use it differently from the other community spaces that are close by, like King School near the station on Lincoln, and Thomas Paine School near the station on Philo, and the churches in those areas that open themselves up to community events. That they're there, and to have the room, you have to have the programming to make it worth the investment of the capital that we're going to spend. So that was why I was okay with kind of letting go of this for these 2 particular stations.
Well, it sounds like from the comments, everyone recognizes the need for the training room as being part of the essential package, but the community room is being let go. Oh, Grace.
Thank you. Because, to clarify that this is separate, right? We're talking about a separate community room, not using the training room as community space sometimes, right?
It would, so if we have a community room need, the idea is we have to have now public space, public bathrooms, public voyeur, separation. If it remains a training room, the size differentials aren't enormously as far as the room itself, but adding the public voyeur, the public bathrooms, creating that separation of space, that's what starts to attack onto some of this stuff. So it's not to say that a training room without all of that stuff couldn't intermediately be used from time to time with either, fire department coordination or internal staff coordination, but it's not really going to be set up for that unless we pursue the small community room, which will add some of the public essences of that.
Thank you. Yeah, 'cause I'm just trying to think about if it's worth the cost, if there is a need for this. I'm still at a no so far, but I'm willing to hear if there is a strong need for it. I agree with some of what James was saying, that is extra cost and staff and traffic coming in and out of the stations when people need to be coming in and out from emergencies, increased parking, and that there are other community spaces. James mentioned some with the school district. There's also Salt and Light right across the street that I think would probably be happy to have some partnerships for things like if there were first aid, CPR trainings for the public, that those spaces do exist. So I think the way I'm seeing it now, it seems like there are alternatives, and it doesn't seem like it's worth the cost to me still.
All right, sounds like the council direction for this part of the scoping is to stick with the training room. Should we move on to the next item?
Sure. And I just want to reference this for everybody. I don't know if I made this clear, but essentially, if we can settle on a program, FGMA is going to take the next step to conceptualizing this a little bit better for public consumption, at which point we would host a community engagement. So if we host community engagement and there's an overwhelming desire for something that's not in our program or for something to be cut that is in our program, there's another opportunity before we head into final design.
And I forgot to mention at the beginning, we're at the scoping stage of this process right now, which is what you're hearing tonight, and then that will provide direction to the architects to begin design.
Correct. So the next item that had very even support across the board for was additional fire administration space. Overwhelmingly, it was yes at one. 4 people said yes at least at one station. 2 said yes at both, and 2 said no at neither. So right now in the program that we had presented to you and we'll kind of highlight on later, it's implemented as fire administration at one of the stations with the idea that, you know, we just plugged it in at one, but the idea could be it could be the other one if it made more sense, or if council discussion leads us down a different path here, then we can talk about that.
Can you clarify fire administration? Are these additional administrators or moving people from one of the existing stations out?
I think in the interim, the idea would probably be to house potentially like fire prevention services, or just have additional administrative space. I don't think it's necessarily going to be creating space for new office spaces for people. I think it's more something to either relocate like fire prevention or in the future fire administration at some point. So
it's not necessarily for the chief, deputy chief. We have service officers that take care of all types of stuff, and so right now we've got a lieutenant's office, but anyone else that has to do any kind of work on the computers, like I said, community risk reduction people, anytime we're doing work on data entry and all those type of things, we need space for those individuals. A lot of times we may have people who are on light duty and they're working on projects and there's nowhere to put them. You know, they have to wait until someone's off of their computer that's set for the lieutenants and the captains to move into a space to work. Sometimes we can get a mobile laptop set up from IT and allow them to, you know, sit somewhere else, but right now we don't have anywhere to put them. So just independent workstations, administrative space to come in and do those type of duties. We just don't have an area for them. So it's not just for us. We have administrative space right now, but we don't have space for administrative functions to be carried out.
Well, when I see a graph like this, it's when we ask you, what do you recommend as being essential?
Essentially, it would be at least at one station that we have administrative offices where we could put everybody in one area. The workstations and the offices would be in one area. If it makes more sense to put some at one and some at another, we could do that too. Like I said, moving into the design phase, I'm not the designer, so they'll show us, and just like Tim said, if we see how they've designed it and we go, oh no, we don't like that, maybe we want them here, we want that changed, we can do those things as we move forward.
And just to highlight one more thing, so if we have additional fire administration at one space, that I think essentially accounts for at least one additional office, an expanded report writing room, and then a small conference area, whereas the other station would still have the singular administration office for the lieutenant's office and a report writing room still. This adds a little bit of extra buffer in there for that type of stuff. And, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll add to that as well, just to give you an idea of our current situation. As you know, council passed the approval to hire the fire marshal this year. We have our campus fire prevention officer and the fire marshal that are operating out of borrowed space at the university right now. So we're essentially borrowing an office right now that belongs to the city of Champaign under our contract with the university. So we have we have negative space now, so we have immediate needs. And just to give you an idea, we're working on our community risk assessment right now for community risk reduction. I've got 3 guys on light duty right now, and I've got IT setting up computer workstations just in our conference space. So there's been an ongoing need for administrative spaces for 10 of my 20 years. So.
Well, we have 6 of the 8 people who completed the survey indicating support for additional space, depending on where. Would a path forward work for council if we directed the designers to focus on additional space at one location, that to be determined? Mary Alice?
I guess my question is, it sounds to me, since we're building very similar stations with a couple of add-ons here and there and so forth, I actually don't think we have to make a decision right now in terms of which one it is, because, right, as long as we know that it's going to be at least one, then they'll build it into the design, and then we can say yay or which one goes, right? Okay.
You good with that?
Yes.
Everyone good with that? Okay. So we are good with additional fire administration space at one station to be determined.
Yes, and I won't belabor any discussions that we don't have to have, but I did chat with Mike and Damon prior to this, and right now the setup actually has, their desire was if we have the training room, but we enhance the training room at one where we're not creating any new square footage, we're just making one training room slightly bigger and one slightly smaller into like more of a conference room. If the one with the smaller conference room were enhanced with the administration space, the conference room that's tied to the administration space, we could potentially eliminate one of those 2, which actually ends up saving us some additional space and money at the end of the day. But
I'm not sure I followed that, but I'll believe you.
It'll be easier when we get to the program. It'll be
moving walls around within the same space.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
I should have waited.
But thank you.
Okay, so then the next one would be the outbuilding. To discuss reserving, okay, that's on both actually now. I'm gonna skip that one because I think that's my mistake there. The lead or passive house certification is the last one, just I wanted to kind of discuss with some folks, and I think there was a majority that said not pursuing the certification for the anticipated cost was the preference. There was kind of a split between whether we had theoretical scoring done or not. There were a handful that thought, certification was still, potentially an important thing to consider. So I just, there's a little bit of a split here. I think there's majority on no, but then there's a question of the theoretical scoring or not. So I just wanted to put that out there for discussion.
Comments on that? Sharice?
I need some clarification on what any of that means. I'm just gonna be honest. I don't really, my understanding from what I read was that you have to have a lead certification or something. Illinois requires it or something.
No.
Okay, so they don't.
I'll give you a brief overview, then Grace, I think, can probably fill in better than me.
Okay,
but-
and the other thing, when you add on to that, will this affect our ISO score, our ISO wonderful award that we have?
Not the lead certification. That has
okay.
no effect on ISO scoring at all.
Okay,
The lead and the passive house are more tied towards green building initiatives, clean air, renewable energy, better energy efficiency, better water usage data, minimizing water consumption, reusing stormwater, anything and everything on that kind of falls under something in that. Passive house, I think, is more tied to more the energy efficiency component only. But the certification itself, a lot of it we can incorporate in our design. The certification is really doing post-processing commissioning of the building to verify that we are or are not meeting the desired recommendations. And then I won't say any more if Grace wants to add on to that.
Yeah, and I also wanted to highlight too that we got some recommendations from the Sustainability Advisory Commission that were in our packet a week or two ago. So those might be a good one to refresh for us too. But for LEED, the green energy or the green building design, according to them, it costs 0 to 7% more to build a LEED green building, and you can save $20 to $50 per square foot over the 50-year lifetime of the building, or no, maybe that's 20-year net present value. So according to them, it makes a lot of sense financially, and some of the biggest benefits are, cost savings with efficiency of energy and water, insulation, and all that. But actually, a lot of their main savings, they say, is from the human quality of life in that place. With cleaner air, they have other areas that's indoor environmental quality that considers like paint fumes and what materials you're using, amount of daylight, and even the colors of the walls and stuff like that that make a better quality of the environment for the individuals. And that's actually where they say some of the most cost saving comes in. Some of the main categories for a LEED new building are location and transportation, sustainable sites, water efficiency, energy and atmosphere, materials and resources, indoor environmental quality, and they have also innovation and regional priority, just depending on where you are. So I think that there's a lot of great things that go into it overall that they say can save money on the project. So I think it would be great to have that in. That was one of the SAC recommendations, was to do at least the scoring, even if we don't pay for certification. I think that it's not necessarily worth it to pay for the official registration to have a plaque that says you're an official LEED building, but you can still use the scorecard and plan and design all of these things to still have a building that saves costs and has those same features, just without the official certificate. And then another one, if I could mention too, the SAC also recommended, in addition to some of the things we already talked about, solar, geothermal, and LEED, was also about considering shared use of space, especially on Philo where there's a big lot. If there can be possibilities to continue some community gardening, or have other public features like playgrounds or just native habitat areas, but to consider some of the outdoor space in the lot as well.
Any thoughts from Jaya or James on this? Jaya?
Yeah, this one, if I can jump in.
Sure.
Okay, so I will say that this was one that I think having more information about the different options would be helpful. I will say that, Tim was really generous with his time and answered questions that I had, but in terms of specifics, in terms of which direction to go, I think the advice from the Sustainability Advisory Committee has been really helpful. I don't know that I feel strongly that we need to do the actual certification, but my understanding is that we've also, as a city, made a commitment towards more sustainable buildings, and I think that it's important that we honor those commitments that we've been making. So cost, of course, is important, but I don't know, Tim, if you could weigh in on what you've shared with me in terms of some of that guidance that had been committed to previously in terms of construction projects like this. That might be helpful.
There's past information. I think I included this on the staff notes on this one, talking about the city had previously passed a policy that, we should pursue, I'm not going to remember it verbatim, but either certification or renewable energy on new city facilities. I think if there's a payback of better than 10 years on the certification of it, I think that's clearly not verbatim, but we have something like that was passed, I think, 7 or 8 years ago. It's on file. We haven't built a facility in 40 plus years, so it was all theoretical until now. So now we're kind of at that point where we say, does that still make sense or not? And then I think the other part of that is I did a little bit of research just looking around to see what other municipalities are doing, what other, the university is an example, they do a ton of LEED certification type stuff there at the university, and I've checked in with them. And the state of Illinois has a policy on it as well, and they set it up where I think it's anything that's a building with 10,000 square foot, contiguous square foot or more that's used for people space. Is supposed to be LEED certified, but they've got a number of caveats, which includes overly burdensome cost, historical prevention. I can't think of the other ones exactly, but they've got a few caveats where we don't have anything built into ours as caveats for consideration other than the 10-year payback, and it's not well defined as to what that 10-year payback is for. Is it just for the capital cost of it? Is it capital cost plus certification? Is it just certification? So it's kind of up in the air a little bit, in my opinion. It's open for interpretation, I would say. So that's why we kind of brought it here, and it's not perfectly, vetted in this regard. The MO that I got, and I had talked with, I think Town of Normal has some requirements, but they have it isolated to the Uptown Normal location, and they've got a certain square footage that requires that as well, which was like, I think close to that 10,000 square feet. The state is 10,000. I think ours is something like 1,500 square feet, so it's not necessarily in line with some of the other ones that are out there. But that's the data I can provide on it. That's as much as I know about it.
James, did you have any questions, comments?
Yeah, I don't have a question. I just wanted to weigh in. I think I'm similar to Jaya in that we need to meet our commitments, but I don't think we should do that to the extent of pursuing the extra cost of certification. If we know what the checklists are and we can do things that would move us forward and put us in a better spot, we should do it. I have observed what it takes to be LEED certified and all the work that goes into getting that certification, and if we're doing our best to meet the goals, I don't know that we need to go for that expense.
Mary Alice?
I guess I would say, I don't remember how I voted on this. I know I did not pursue certification. I think it's nice if we do theoretical scoring, because it's a guide in terms of how we make the decisions. As Grace said, how much window space and what we paint the walls and so forth. So if we just decide not to do that, then we're not going to keep that at the forefront of our minds as we're building. So regardless of how I voted before, I do agree with doing the theoretical scoring right now.
I concur.
Are we moving toward theoretical scoring to hold our, to focus on our commitments without the extra cost or labor involved in the actual certification?
I have one more.
Pardon? Straw poll. Sharice had one more comment, then we'll do a straw poll.
I just want to, because I guess my main question too regarding this is the LEED certification something that has to be done yearly, annually, biannually, or whatever? And do you have to pay every time you do it? And if you have to do that certification, does it require that, there's an inspection, and then if this isn't done, you have to get this done? You know what I mean? Is it this whole long process? Because otherwise,
The initial certification, I believe, is a more robust process to verify a lot of the things that you've said you've scored, you're actually scoring, so that's, we're 98% efficient. Well, we checked you and you're actually 80% efficient, so that's not true. So that's kind of some of the paying the piper stuff on the front side, initial certifications. Once you went through the initial certification process, they've commissioned the building and said, yes, this is how it's operating and all of these things, these scores are correct and valid and all that stuff. There is a renewal process, but I'm not sure exactly what that entails or how frequently that is.
That it entails council coming and cooking for the firefighters at least once a year, so.
You wish. So my other thing is this though. So with the theoretical scoring, us doing, just doing it theoretically, even though we're just following the LEED rubric, will basically, is that what you're saying, Grace? Is that we just kind of follow their rubric? It's what that is, right? Okay, so we're following that rubric, but will it will the cost, you know, we're not going towards certification, but how would that affect costs yet and still?
I think that just depends on, you know, where we actually land. Early in my career, I was exposed to a lot of LEED accreditation and certification, and in some places it was, you know, the gold standard to go after the platinum, and, you know, people were trying to do any box they could check at that point to do it, and obviously that drives up costs. Probably a lot of your baseline stuff that gets you to the basic LEED certification is probably things that we want to pursue anyways, and is becoming more and more of a standard in the building code, which I can't say that specifically, but I know the building code that has been updated for 13 years now is, you know, it's going to address some of those things naturally, but I can't say quantitatively what that means. But, you know, I think qualitatively, if we look at, you know, trying to pursue things to get at least a baseline certification for things that make sense financially and, you know, kind of align with some of the other programming things we've talked about, you know, I think that makes sense. You know, maybe not going crazy to, you know, pursue things that are high dollar items with what we would maybe perceive as limited return.
Okay.
I think Grace addressed it too. I mean, we're talking about looking at 20 years down the road, you know, to see that return too. I mean, you'll see it, but I mean, it's not going to be an immediate cost savings that you see.
Okay.
Well, let's do a straw poll on theoretical scoring. Is there support for that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here in person. Do we have virtual hands in the air?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. Sounds like we have consensus there to pursue virtual scoring, theoretical scoring.
Okay, I'm just going to bring the funding up again. You know, I think the idea will be between now and concept that I'll say for like community engagement is staff, i.e. will probably cook up some ideas with finance as to, you know, how we can parse this out based on some of your guys' feedback here. Grants is a very nebulous thing. They come and they go, they're here and they're not. Depending on how that shakes out, it's kind of, you know, are we pursuing it at an opportune time or not? And if we're not, and we are bent on, you know, waiting for grants, that kind of goes hand in hand with then delays, which I think was generally not an idea. But the idea being the design is still going to take us from the time we say go, it's probably 6 to 8 months between when we say go, final design, everything, to the point that they're ready to bid. So there is a window in there in which the better shovel-ready projects you have, if they're 50% done on design, that makes us a little bit more shovel-ready than the next person if a grant opportunity poses itself in the next year. If not, you know, that again, some of those funding scenarios, we'll have to hash out a few options out there that provides you all a little bit better detail on, you know, where our shortfalls are and what we can and can't do with the funding sources that we've kind of discussed here.
And I will add the finance department will be working on the financial forecast shortly. So that will help inform the discussion as well.
I do want to mention that graph is illegible on the live stream. So
okay.
I'm not sure anyone could tell which column is which if they were watching on the live stream.
I'll read them out just to try to help. I hear you. Going left to right, more bonding had 6 votes. Eliminating or delaying other capital replacement and investment projects had 0 votes. Delaying construction of at least one fire station had 1 vote. CDBG funds for eligible expenses had 4 votes. ARPA funds for eligible expenses had 4 votes. Seeking grants had 7 votes. Rate adjustments to other revenue streams had 3 votes. Additional CR and I contributions from the general fund had 4 votes. And no support beyond the essential needs had 2 votes.
For the public, can you explain CR and I?
Capital replacement and investment funds. These are generally projects that don't necessarily have a dedicated funding source for these things. So the general fund contributes money towards the capital plan to help pay for those capital investments, such as facilities projects. I think some other ones that are in there are some street lighting stuff, traffic signals, And some of that stuff is not that we don't have a dedicated revenue stream, we just don't have enough dedicated revenue from those dedicated revenue streams, so we make up with it from our general fund transfers for the CR&I.
And the last thing I'll add, one thing that's significant is the city is carrying almost no debt, which is almost unheard of for cities. But we're starting out in a very strong position.
So this is just the draft program. I would say this more or less aligns with everything that's come out of our discussion this evening as well. That the orange lines are ones that we're kind of, I think we need to figure out this more. Which this first one you can see is part of the public space, the training room. This was kind of from fire's standpoint. They would, if we're gonna do it, is do one larger training room at one of the facilities and a smaller conference area at the secondary facility, so that for departmental-wide trainings, they just need one really good space for that. And then what we were talking about earlier is, if you look at this is kind of draft Philo, draft Lincoln, but they're not fixed to the locations yet, so there's that subjectivity still. But the 300 that you can see here, and this 250 for a small conference room for additional fire administration, there's potentially, from talking with fire, those could probably be consolidated into a singular space. Maybe it needs to be 400 square feet instead of 250 or 300, but there's probably a square footage savings in there as well, and talking with them. Though the other big question, I think there was pretty much an extreme lack of support for city offices at any of the stations. The Essential program actually had one office budgeted in there. The question I have is, due to lack of support, should we just consider that one office non-essential and eliminate it?
You mean one office per station?
That's one city office per station. We would still have one fire administration office per station minimum. So I don't know if you can see this. I'll highlight.
Space we can get.
I should probably undo that.
I don't see the value in it.
Okay.
Yeah, who would use it?
Well, I think this was one that if we were going to go public space and stuff, there may have been a more functional use for somebody to use it either as flex space, or somebody that we have we have challenging spaces, as Mike has alluded to, is if they provided some interim relief, or there was a functional justification to have somebody housed there that was, if we had community room space, going to help put on events there and do things like that, then it may have made sense in that scenario. But
Oh, sorry, Chandra.
I think if we're not doing the community room, then I don't think we need to do the city offices, especially if there will be admin offices for the fire people in both stations, or one station, or whatever is the ultimate decision. So I don't think, I think this whole line can probably be deleted.
so that's James and Chandra are kind of on that boat.
Mary Alice?
And my only question is, the fire prevention marshal, is there space, and that is not, they wouldn't use the city office, there is space in the fire administration for that individual?
I think if we did the expanded fire administration services as we have shown further down here, there's a secondary office that'd be being created at the at least the one station, all aside from like this lieutenant's office, which would be the essential.
So my opinion is that we should have enough space for fire administration, but we don't really need to keep the city offices as long as we have the fire administration.
Sounds like we have consensus. Okay.
Okay. So again, this one was one where folks had kind of talked about, sorry, that's not the right place now. Support for accommodating 6. So that was kind of this discussion that we, I think, just kind of tabled earlier, of talking about what we got from the feedback was that people supported the idea of 6 either in design or possibly just reserving space for the future, but there wasn't overwhelming support for design and build it now type stuff. We had this conversation a little bit ago. As far as if we design and build for 4, which is our current staffing at the substations, you know, it's all dependent on projections of where fire service goes. You know, the real honest answer is we don't know. The idea in my mind is be reasonably prepared. Whether reasonably prepared to us means design it and build it and have extra space and make the investment now, or design it, we could bid it as an alternate, and if we got to cut things, that could be one of the things that gets cut, or just reserve space conceptually, do a strategic layout of the building that would show, you know, if and when we get 2 more, we would expand out this way for living quarters and we would expand out this way for bay space. Wouldn't necessarily, the reserving space is kind of more of a strategic conceptual idea, whereas the design is we would really be paying them to go ahead and design the whole building, but design it in a way that there would be a structured delineation for, like, alternate 1 would be eliminate this outside wall and push it out 20 more feet to create more living space. But this discussion kind of went back and forth earlier, so that's.
So it's either design for 6 or design as an alternate, design for 4 with a design alternate for 6. Is that the choice?
It's design and build for 4 and reserve space for how we would expand to 6. Design and then either build or bid an alternate to bid the 5th and 6th ones.
Grace?
I'm confused. I thought we were doing 6 and the option was to do more than that.
No, the essential is 4 with a accommodation of 2 additional for 6 total per shift.
Oh, okay. I thought we were going 6 with the option of 8. So 4 is the essential and 6 we're talking about to design or just reserve space, right?
What you're referring to is my opinion, that the essential should be 6, not 4. Meaning we're building it for expansion in the future, even if we're not going to do it now. You use those spaces now. So there's that's the discussion. Should the essential be 4 because that's what we have and that's all we need to replace? Or should we be building it for the expansion? I feel we should be building it for the expansion, and the essential the number should be 6. So.
And with that,
can I add another option here?
Yeah.
Which is design and build for 6, but finish for 4.
I think, yeah, that's what Tim is saying.
and with the bays, because you were.
That doesn't sound like what Tim is saying. Tim is talking about have a wall that you can blow out to add 2 more people or add more space for the bay. I'm talking about a shell that would accommodate 6 in the future, but not doing the finishing for the final 2 rooms or the finishing for the extra spaces in the bay until we're ready to expand to 6 people.
Yeah, and James, that is an alternate option that's not on here. There's some cost savings to it, obviously, not doing the finishings and stuff. The question would be is what would fire use that space for in the interim? So do we leave it as an empty shell? Is that more useful to them, or is it more useful for us to at least build walls, set it up for the bunks that they could use maybe as offices in the interim? I don't know that answer, but that is an option. Build the shell.
We're building to withstand a significant tornado. We want the whole shell to be built at once, it seems to me.
Grace, you need to finish your thought, and then Carol.
Yes, thank you. Because you were saying that there was 4 people per ambulance usually, right? And so then
No,
with
we're not talking about ambulance. This is firefighters.
Yes, so my question is, since we're already building the second bay, if we were running 2 fire trucks out of there, would you need 8 people then? Like, my question is it either 4 or 8, or is 6 the number you would need to run both?
I'm sorry. We're talking about being able to just put another truck in there, and there would probably be a division of the members in that house who's jumping on the trucks. That gets in the staffing models and everything else. We just need the space for 2 additional people.
So 6 would be okay to run
Yeah.
2 bays?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Carol?
I'm not going to add to this other than to ask a question I don't think it's clear at the moment, because it's not clear to me, and I can't believe it's clear to the council members, and I thought that Grace was actually going in this direction, is what are the implications for apparatus if we were to go to 6 per shift per station? That's implying that we have more apparatus than we have now, correct?
No, we're talking about an addition of staff, an addition of apparatus. Maybe, like I said, we're getting into discussions of staffing, response models. Are we going to man our own ambulances? All kinds of stuff that we're not really prepared to talk about now. We're just telling you that if we're going to look at expansion, that's why we're saying 2.
I think just to be fair, as council thinks about this, it's not just about 2 more people. No. It's about more equipment. It's about potentially more bays. It's not just, so it's a big implication, not a small implication. So I just want that to be fully understood, and I'm not sure it is fully understood.
I would agree with that, and that's why I think, we're trying to express that getting past a few of these humps and getting to the design phase will help, like seeing this stuff visually, then asking those questions, because we can change it, and that's what Tim was referring to earlier. We get into this and it'll be a little easier, because right now we'd have to go into all those other things to talk about, to clarify the staff, the apparatus, the equipment, all those things, but seeing the design would help.
Sharice.
Just real quick, because I don't speak firefighter. Apparatus means extra truck, or, okay. Bunk means not just the bed, but the storage where these people would have to store their equipment. Okay, and
sleeping quarters.
Sleeping quarters. Now, I guess my main question is, the way that sleeping quarters are now, are they designed where everybody sleeps in one room and it's like, a barracks? Or is it designed that everyone has their own space? Is that the kind of design that we're talking about having?
Yes, individual sleeping quarters.
Okay, so it's individual sleeping quarters, so we're also talking about extra walls, sockets, all that kind of stuff, not just a bed. Because I think in my mind, and because I'm more of an actor person, I'm seeing Chicago Fire, in my head. And so it's like, oh yeah, we're all just, camping out here at the place. Okay, so I'm trying to get an idea. I'm a visual person, so I need to understand how that works. So it is more of everybody has their own little space and their own little storage trunk or something, and so that would add how much more extra footage other than the 4 that we have as essential, and taking it up to 6. Or anybody here, just an estimate?
It's about 90 square foot per bunk room, but then there's additional support bay space that would grow with that.
Okay. Thank you.
Can you clarify again? Is essential now defined as 6?
No, that's what I'm asking. I'm saying essential should be 6.
But essential currently is defined as 4, which is what
Yes.
we're replacing what's there now.
Yes.
And you came in with the original spreadsheets you gave us previously, essential was 4. So suddenly now it's 6.
No, it's not suddenly. It was asked the question, what did we think? And I was saying, I think that the essential should be 6, not 4. But right now, currently, essential is 4.
That's a huge question. Chandra.
No, just so we're using the same terminology, the essential program is 4, and I believe Chief Dade is recommending that City Council go with the enhanced option of 6, just so everybody's using the same terminology.
Gotcha.
But I think he was saying, in his view, the enhanced is essentially the essential, but the essential is 4. He's recommending the 6.
Mike, did you want to add something?
I did. I wanted to help clarify where the 6 comes from. I think that's what a lot of people are struggling with because we're talking about having 4 and then being able to expand. Our collective bargaining with our firefighters union guarantees a minimum of 3 people per rig. So if we got into ourselves in a situation where we needed to expand and add another company to a station, we would be looking at minimum manning. So that minimum manning would be 6, 3 people per piece of equipment. Hope that under.
Mary Alice.
I just wanted to add, because I pulled up the survey that you gave us. So with there's 2 options for the 6 per shift, right? There's the enhanced and then there's the amplified. In the enhanced, it was an additional 1,000 square feet. So 700 living space and 300 bay support, with the expected cost to be about $610,000 per station. So that's the reference. In the amplified, it was more space. I think it was fitness room and so forth, and that was estimated at almost $1 million per firehouse. So I just wanted to kind of provide that information because some of the additional information wasn't on the slides. And I don't want to really split hairs here, but I'm still caught up in this paramedics thing, and so this is what I'm thinking. If we have 6 living spaces for people, individuals, that third bay, we don't have another truck, right? We can't slide in a truck there, but we could potentially slide in another vehicle there. And when we have trucks, I'm assuming that there are certain ways that it's built. Maybe there's additional, I'm just thinking of the big hoses on Lincoln. You know, we don't have to necessarily build out that specifically for a fire truck. It should fit if it goes in there. I get that's why I'm trying not to split hairs, but I'm also trying to leave our options open, if that makes any sense. So there.
Chandra, go ahead.
Can I, when there's a moment too?
Yeah, you follow Chandra, please.
Thoughts. So I think Chief Day, we probably should, take his word a little weighty. If he thinks 6 should be essential, and I like James's idea of building for 6, but filling the space for 4 and then leaving it so that, in the event that we need to expand to 6, we have that room and it's already built. Because I also don't like the idea of having to do construction on a firehouse that is active and they're living in and you're working to expand it. So that seems a little disruptive for the 4 or 6 who would already be there. So I like the idea that James said, and I think we should, Chief Dade has the experience and the knowledge and the background. Like if he says, we're moving towards 6, then we should strongly consider doing 6. So.
Jaya.
Yeah, I actually would echo what Chandra said, to add another piece of, we're talking about a long-term investment, and where, some of the additional space for an additional truck or other equipment might be more feasible to add on externally, right? We've talked about maybe leaving space for additional equipment to be stored, that kind of thing. Adding on living space at a later date seems like it would be much more challenging. So I think retaining that space, because our city is growing, right? We want to continue to see our city grow, which means there's going to be increased need, which means increased staffing, right? So I think planning, that's not really long-term, that's probably more medium or even short-term for that level of expansion, rather than getting 5-10 years down the road and being out of space again when we're putting this big investment into the space seems not like the best approach. And I think what Chief Dade is saying is we're getting there, right? We know we're going to need those additional firefighters, and so planning for that space now, to me, makes sense, but also being mindful of the cost of we're not there where we need that additional living space. So I think James's point of reserve the space, but we don't have to necessarily have that fully fleshed out for the current moment, because that is something that would come up down the road. So that would be my my recommendation or my feeling is to make sure we have the space for when we need it, but not put too much in terms of getting it exactly where it will need to be when at that point expansion.
So what you're saying is design for 6, finish for 4?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Design and build for 6.
I just want to add one caveat in here.
Mhm.
When we say additional bunk space, Mary Alice queued me up on this, but it's 1,000 square feet because it's bunk space, it's another single user restroom, and it's expansion to the locker rooms. So all of that has to go out with this. Not finishing is probably not necessarily an option for, I'm going to say, the bathroom and the locker rooms, because they're going to use them anyways. You save some on not finishing the bunk rooms, but it's probably not substantial in my mind. I would almost say if you're going to, what's that?
Furnishings at that point.
Yeah, I think if you get to that stage, it would make more sense if you support it to just get it done and be done with it, rather than saving some of that space.
Grace?
Thank you. Interesting change of point, because I was going to say maybe settle it, because we're not talking about very much space here. We're talking about 200 square feet. It's a very small amount of space, it seems, to the whole station. But you're saying it'd be about 1,000 square feet for adding 2 because of the other things. Because I was going to point out that our day room, kitchen, dining room is already designed for 4 to 6 people. So I was thinking that, this would be a relatively small cost. And I imagine it would cost a lot less to build extra 200 square feet than, it seems pretty ridiculous to do a building addition for that much space. So I'm in support of designing and building for 6, whether it means only furnish and use 4 until we need the other 2. But I think on the chief's recommendation, and that it's overall not a small amount of space and seems easier to do from the get-go than add on, I would be in support of designing and building that outer construction for 6 bunks.
Okay, are we ready to do a straw poll on that? Unless people have thumbs up. So it's a design and build for 6. Virtual people?
I would support that.
James?
I would too.
Okay, all right.
Okay, this other one is just kind of it's related to that, so we don't have to discuss that. That's just, that's part of that 1,000 feet that we talked about, is if you're going to build for 6, you're going to build the turnout gear for a couple additional spaces as well, which conclude, not everything. Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. The outbuilding, again, I think a lot of people supported the idea of this, but not like building it. Really, the only question here is, I think, how strongly do we say we would reserve space for this? I think it just depends on, once the project's all said and done, how we partition the remainder of the land and what we do with it. Are we going to keep an extra acre to do this, or, and this doesn't have to be hard and fast right now, honestly. This could just be kind of your opinion for now, but it's good food for thought as we get to that point in the future.
Maybe on the site plan, indicate on the site plan where a potential building could be and at which station.
We could do that.
Any other thoughts on
I have one
Charisse?
question. Well, what exactly would the outbuilding be used for? Is that like the ambulance bay, or? No. This is, what is it, storage?
They once they get it furnished over at 70 or 610 Glover, you can come see. They've got a bunch of tactical response equipment and other storage that they're kind of bursting at the seams with right now. So it's going to be any and all miscellaneous equipment, including vehicles, trailers. They can probably talk on it better than me.
Fire prevention house?
Fire prevention house.
Okay. Go ahead, Chief.
With that building, like I said, it'd be easier to just look into concept and design after we see it. But besides storage, that's where we say it. That's where I'm saying, just from how it's been done other places, that's where I feel we can save money in certain training aspects. Instead of building the training room into the structure of the building, having it in a structure that costs less to build, we could do that. But instead of talk about that now, it'd just be easier to show.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
yeah.
Okay, is there anything else you need?
I think we're through it. I think we've effectively got through this, that I can, go ahead.
I had two things that I didn't quite get answered in this process. One is, what are the plans for an additional bay? And I'm just curious if we have some revelation about ambulances at our locations, do we have to go back to the drawing board? That's one thing. I also want to talk about the solar thing one more time.
On the ambulance stuff, I think the idea, like I said, we've received submittals from both the ambulance service. The idea being that we will decide whether we are going to pursue the ambulance option based on their submittals with the final design. So in my head, in the perfect world,
Okay.
we're doing a community engagement on at least our stuff sometime in November. And based on the feedback from that, and hopefully sorting out the interest and stuff from the ambulances, by December, we're able to say, designers, design this thing, and then the ambulance services are interested in this, and we're pursuing finalizing that stuff with them. So you're going to design the whole thing, depending on what comes out of that.
And what was your
Okay,
second?
if we decide in 10 years that we need an additional bay at one or both of these stations, is that going to be a part, will we know where that's going to go as a part of the base design?
Somewhat, yes. The discussions we've had with FGMA is that ultimately we want everything to be somewhat expandable for the future. That could be expanding horizontally or vertically. So if we had to go, if we need more bay space, we could go longer bays and do double deep bays, or we could go horizontally and build another wall out and kick everything out another 25 feet. But the idea is going to be that they need to accommodate some of that strategic thought. It's not going to be designed, but think about it as a gray box outside of our building. We've reserved space. We're not over. If we have a 15-foot setback on our property, we may build it 40 feet off the property line, so we have an expansion space there. And then some of the stations we toured were built in a way that they weren't quite as easily expandable. They had like living quarters on one side, administration on another side, and the bays in the middle, which somewhat restricted how they could grow. They had to grow longitudinally rather than horizontally in that situation, because the bay, you couldn't tack on another bay in that situation. You had to build another bay longer. But as long as we have that covered, which we intend to kind of have the layout of the building positioned in a location that is strategically placed so that if and when that expansion happens, we know where it will go and how it will go.
Okay, and then the thing I wanted to talk about with regard to solar, and this has to do with my experience with PPAs, where somebody else puts the solar equipment on your building and then charges you for the power it's being generated from your building. I would suggest that if we're thinking about solar and having the buildings be net zero power, that we commit to doing that ourselves, because I'd rather, if people are thinking in terms of the power purchase agreements, I'd rather do that with how we buy our power and do that at scale. If we want to offset the power that we use in our fire stations and say we want it to be solar generated, it's better to do that. If we're going to buy it from somebody else and include a third party in it, it's better to do that at scale just by buying, like in the municipal aggregation market, saying we want solar power for this. So I would be supportive of us looking to do our own solar on our building. I would not be supportive of us building our building for somebody else to put a solar array on top of it, when we could do that, I think, more economically and get the same result through how we purchase power.
The only thing I would add to that is there are operations and maintenance ramifications with us owning and operating the solar, of which we don't really have staff that
Right.
have that training yet.
Right, and if we're gonna offload that, we might as well do it at scale with maybe somebody who puts a power grid on the landscape recycling or the old dump space. I mean, it just doesn't feel like we need to. Those things don't have to be attached for us to accomplish the same goal.
Okay. I think we're done. Thank you all for your very careful consideration of all these choices. And next steps are what?
Next steps are, I will get in contact, I will revise that draft program based on the feedback that I received from everybody here. And I will send that on to FGMA to conceptualize that for community engagement, hopefully in the next month, but I'll keep you up to date after I speak with them about, they'll essentially provide a conceptual site layout, a conceptual building layouts, and renderings of the look and feel of what they would be projecting for these type of things. After that, final feedback from community engagement, and then push forward into final design where they would actually move forward. I think the other thing that I failed to mention, between now and that community engagement, I think we'll probably work on formulating the funding alternatives to support the program that you guys have chosen.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yep.
And with that, there's no further business before us, and this meeting is adjourned.